Hey guys, Amelia here. Welcome back to my second episode of Small Gang Deep Dives. We're going to be discussing the role of light tackle within your gang. Light tackle serves three main roles. It's the scout of your gang. It's the person who's going to make sure that the way is clear and make sure that there's content at the end of your destination. The second role is that it serves as your hard tackle in your gang in both defensive scrams as well as keeping sure long points on targets that are outside of your main gang's reach. Third is that this is a very ill-defined role. Many different ships can serve in the tackle role, from battleships to frigates. So let's jump on into it. So the first thing we're going to discuss is finding the content. And there are a bunch of different tools out there to help you do this. We'll start with the in-game map. So the in-game map is a great place to tell where these people are. So if we start over here in the statistics area, and we have the average pilots in space in the last 30 minutes, we can look and see how many people are in space. And it's a great way to find radders and big areas of population. So we can see over here GTAC-G, hey, we got 10 people in space, 6 jumps away. We can roam over there, try and grab something. Another thing you can tell is, are they mining? Are they radding? Are they just chilling? We can right click here, look at the sovereignty tab, and see the industry index is going up, but the military is going down, which means that they're probably not doing much radding, but they might be doing some mining. Might be a Rorqual there. Could be some great content. You can also look at average docked pilots in space. This can tell you where you're going to have a lot of population, but not many people out. So it could be their good place to go and escalate a fight and to be able to get a fight, but you're going to have to work ahead it a little bit more. The next tool that I'm going to talk about is Dotlin. Dotlin is also a great tool for understanding routing activity, and it actually helps it's a bit more numeric of a system. So you can actually see the amount of rats killed over time. So right now I'm looking at NPC kills delta, but you can also look at 24 hours and see over the last 24 hours how many ships have been killed. I typically focus on delta because 24 hours is a long period of time, and I don't know if they're still ratting out there. So based on our delta, GTAC-G again, we're seeing zero ratting activity, which supports our initial thought because the military index was going down. But maybe in LW or HB there could be an Ishtar ratting. The next thing we're going to discuss is, once you find these systems where you want to go, how to tackle some of these ratters. So we're going to really be doing a deep dive here on the DScan window and how to utilize it. So first and foremost, we need to look at our probe scanner. This is where you have the list of all of the different anomalies, and you can see based upon this tab here what you can have selected. So I like to have all the anoms showing in my general kind of roaming setup. So I'm going to be jumping into a system here, and let's try and catch a Gila. So in these drone spaces, and in different spaces, you'll have different types of sites. So in drone space, you have hordes, which are typically the most run sites because they are some of the hardest ones and they give the most bounties. So we have nothing on scan here, but we have one person in system. So a common thing to do is you can just warp around to the sun, because the sun is normally a very central point to the system. The other thing you can do is open up your solar system tab here, or you can open it up here, and you can take a look at the map and see where are the anoms in relation to you. So you can see a lot of them are in D-scan range of the sun, which is great. So now I see a Gila on scan. How do I grab this one? So your max D-scan range is 14.3 AU. The best way to go about finding which site this guy is in is to reduce your D-scan range. And you can do that by simply using your mouse wheel to scroll down here. So if you do a control and down scroll here, it goes down by 1 AU. If you just do a regular down scroll here, it goes down by 0.1 AU. And if you scroll down here in the range window here, it jumps by a much higher amount. So it goes from 0 to 1 to 5, 10 to max. So just by doing this, I can get an idea of where he is. I know he's between 1 to 5 AU. Now I can try and hone in a little bit here. So I'll try between 1 to 3. Nice, he's under 3. Under 2? Nope, not under 2. So now we're looking at 2 to 3 here. So that means he's between in one of these sites here. So we'll just jump up. He's between 2 to 2.4, 2 to 2.2, which means that he has to be in this drone horde because he's in 2 to 2.1. So we'll warp over to the drone horde. And now sometimes this can fail you. because this assumes that they're in an anomaly. So you do also have the chance that they are in a belt, any of these belts here, as well as a DED site or a mission or an escalation. So just keep that in mind if you can't find them through this method. And the other good thing to check for a lot of these ratting boats is you can have a tab that has drones on it, and you can see if they have drones out. And you can check, hey, they still have drones out. They're probably still in their site. I can probably catch them. The last tool that I want to talk about when finding a fight is Z-Kill. Now, Z-Kill can be one of the most powerful tools because it can give you intel on what the people are in as well. So, if we're seeing a bunch of battleships, maybe you don't want to go in a retrie, in 2 retries, because you're not going to really be able to engage it. So we can go over here and take a look at, hey, look, there was 11 people that killed a Phantasm in 42G. Maybe I'm nearby. I can look at what they have. Hey, look, we got a Daredevil, Orthrus, Jackdaw. Good intel without even having to burn over there and see. And this can be huge, huge, huge. I'm really surprised how many people don't use eKill as an intel tool, because it refreshes anywhere between 5 to 20 minutes, and it just is free intel. So I highly recommend wherever you're roaming, if you're ever setting a destination somewhere, just pop that region into Z-Kill real quick, check out what's there, what's going on, any recent kills, any activity. There could be no activity on Z-Kill and there could still be content there, but it's still free intel, if there's been recent kills, and you can tell what ships are out. So check it out, guys. So now we're getting to the fun part, guys. We're going to be showing some clips here of me flying a Malediction in R10 in a Jackdaw fleet. We have a Kronos and an Orca tackled, and there's a Hurricane fleet coming in to try and push us off. I'm going to let this play for a little bit without talking over it, and so you can just listen to the communication a little bit, and then I'll talk about some few things afterwards.
That works.
Right, the Kronos is hitting
Celestis.
Okay, yeah. Damp the Celestis. I think this Caracal might die. Stay on him.
Yeah, Kirko's down.
Okay, go Celestis now. I'm going to go for the Jag.
Jag behind us.
I got 1 point on the Celestis until I get Jag.
This is gonna die.
Point Jag. Jag next.
Damage on
Comet
check.
coming in.
Webs on Jag.
Scram on Jag. They're all coming in down. Go down below. Play below. Damage on Jag. Get out of this Hurricane's range, guys. Stay like 80 kilometers or more. Go below. Kronos is ramming. Stiletto ramming.
Hard.
Switch to the Stiletto. Point.
Warping links off.
Scram. Okay. Start fragging this tackle. Harpy. Call damage on.
Damage on.
Comet next, then Thrasher. Switch to the Comet. He's gonna ADC and live, I think.
I'm gonna get out with the webs.
Okay. Harpies.
I'm
This
gonna
Harpy
screen.
and then the
Keep
next
going
Harpy
down.
of Keylor.
Yeah, that's fine.
Keylor now?
He's turning. Go Thrasher.
I
Or
need
Claw.
Yeah.
Everything on Claw. I'll try and screen it.
It's fucking Tengu.
The pit Tengu.
Yeah.
Scram Claw.
Marling is burning too. Marley.
Hey guys, so as you can see, we're doing a lot of communication here, and from the Malediction point of view, it's really important to talk about what you're pointing so that the damage can be prioritized to things that are tackled. So here you can see we have a lot of Hurricanes here that are mostly already fit, a few AC ones in here, and they project really well. So it's about keeping that trans really high so that I can sit on grid, and you can see from earlier in this clip, just keeping high trans, sitting around them, and taking almost no damage from them. And that's one of the great things that a good tackle pilot can do, is when they're relatively low tracking but good projection ships, you can take very, very minimal damage and stay on grid. And that's really the most important job of the Malediction here. As we were talking about earlier, we don't have many points on grid, so if I get forced off, we're very not combat effective. So it's really about staying alive and staying on grid. So for the Malediction especially, a lot of that comes down to your cap. So if people don't know, you have a peak cap regen of around 25% capacitor. So if you go anywhere below that, you need to start pulling off and being a little bit safer so that you can regen your cap a little bit so that you have some cap reserve to go in with. Here, the Hurricanes are coming back in. We're thinking about what targets to prime, looking for these separated targets. You need to be very fluid when you're flying the tackle. You should be creative. You should be the one seeing, hey, this guy's out of position. I can go tackle him and call for your gang to be able to come and support him. But you also need to be able to communicate with your DPS to say, hey, can you guys get here? Or should I leave this and go for something that's closer to you guys? Which is what kind of just happened there. That Jackdaw was a bit too far from our Jackdaws. So instead I go for this Brutix who's ramming in a little bit to screen that and start to set up. Now that Jackdaw's coming back out, and now he's in range of my Jackdaws, I can go in for a point on him, and we can try and set up a kill on that. So this is like a really kind of critical role of the Malediction, right? Or your tackle. You're just keeping points. You're staying between their gang and your gang so that you can land defensive scrams on any tackle that comes in. Look at that positioning, right? So I'm always between my gang and their gang. You're kind of like the goalie. You want to make sure that no enemy tackle can shoot through you and get a goal. And it's also about staying on grid as long as possible. So keeping that high trans up. So that turn right there, that's a bit of a risky turn. If they volleyed me while I was dropped my speed there, that could have been pretty bad. It's not the greatest play. But just something to keep out for. And communication. It's all about talking about where you can land the tackle, who you're scramming, if tackle's coming in and you're going to scram it, maybe you don't want to scram it. Maybe your DPS would rather have that be blooming, their MWD sig to be easier to hit. So there's a lot of things that are happening with this, and it's one of the most complicated roles. A lot of people say, hey, let's throw these newer SP pilots into tackle and just let them go at it, when it's actually the opposite thing. You want to have your most veteran pilots really jumping into these tackle ships because of how complicated it is. All of your manual piloting is magnified in this ship because of how fast you go and how little buffer you have. So that means, any mistake you make is going to be like a 4x mistake on a Malediction versus a 1x mistake on like a Gnomon, let's say. And that's why I think it's very important that if you're in your small gang, try and have your veterans fly your tackle ships. It's really important. And it's very also easy to kind of lead your gang from this tackle position. So the last part of this video, guys, I'm going to go over some fittings and talking about how, the role of tackle can really be filled by a bunch of different ships and a bunch of different roles. So the two main things that come to mind with tackle for small gang are the Stiletto and the Malediction, which are both interceptors that are both interdiction nullified, which comes in great use when you're being a scout for your gang. So you can go ahead without too much fear. The only thing that's really going to catch you is an insta-lock camp. This is a kind of classic fit here for the Stiletto. It's one of my go-to fits that I use if I'm not running snakes, if I'm running in a clean pot or something like that. So going through it real quick, we have a buffer shield extender, which is where most of our tanks comes from. We have the Warp Scrambler, which we use for that defensive scram, as well as our Warp Disruptor. And then we have the 5MN. This is, if you're going to bling anything in your fit for tackle, or interceptors especially, guys, the 5MN is the most important thing to bling. And here's why. Under the 5MN, if we compare let's say the Quad Lift, which is kind of the normal meta one, which is 455% signature radius, to a Corelli A-type, you're getting 40, almost 50% if you go to Gisty sig radius reduction, which is huge. It makes your sig tiny. So if we're burning around at like 5k a second with a 76 sig, it makes it really hard for these ships to be able to hit us and track us. And you could see that from that last fight that we saw with the Hurricane, right? The Hurricanes were not able to track me whatsoever, and they wasted so much time just trying to shoot into me. And then for our lows, we got our damage control, buff our tank up a little bit, and then 2 nanos, which helps with our speed and agility. Lastly, when we get to our rigs, I see this a lot, and I'm really surprised that more people don't fit EM rigs to their stilettos. Without this EM rig, you're having a 20% huge gaping hole. So if we take, just EM damage here, our EHP drop significantly. It's actually insane. So we want to make sure we got that rig on, and this field projector is also really important. So especially if you're flying with Lynx, without the projector, you have a lock range of 37 kilometers, which is literally your heated point range. And if you're ever burning in for a point, you're going to start locking them well before you want to be in point range. So even with this ionic rig in, you know, there's times where I'm burning in and I'm at 30 kilometers by the time I finish my lock, because you're going that fast if you're going with like a heated MWD or something. So this ionic rig is important on almost every single tackle ship that you're going to fly. So this is, again, my go-to no snake kind of fit with just kind of buffer, and it kind of annoys me sometimes when I'm flying these type of buffer ships, because you really need to take your time and make sure that you regen your shield off grid before you come back in. I have this problem where I try and get back on grid while I'm still like 20-30% shield, and then you just get alpha'd, and it's really upsetting. So here's another fit. We got the Malediction. It's a little bit more expensive here, but it does very similar job. So again, we're starting with our mids here. We got the Warp Scrambler, Warp Disruptor, and then my A-type MWD. Here's a little bit differently, because instead of being just buffer, and we do have some buffer with this plate, we also have this small Ancil rep, which lets us have some more staying power on grid. So normally what I do is we'll add the EHP, so we're at 4.7 plus the full clip here. So that's another 3.5, puts us around 8k EHP compared to the Stiletto, which had around 6.7. So you're getting a little bit more EHP out of this ship, but you're also a little bit slower, a little bit less agile, but not much. And you're also getting the trade-off of having this NOS, which is huge actually, because if you ever want to go against a nuding ship, and you want to ram and hold that scram, which is pretty rare in small gang, but sometimes you do, it can come really, really in handy. And you also have these two autocannons to help clear some drones off you. And the last ship that I'll talk about is this 400 plated Malediction, which is really quite fun. And it's the ship, it's the fit that I flew on that last clip. So with this, you have significantly larger buffer. We're getting up to 8k buffer before I even start repping. And then you also have an A-type rep on top of that, which means that you have a lot of staying power, and you're able to just stay on grid as long as possible to provide your gang with those points and those scrams. And that's really what it comes down to for your gang. It's what shows your value as an interceptor pilot, is how long can you stay on grid and keep doing your job. So this is kind of the fit that I ran with in that video, and you can see it's very strong. And again, we're going back. We still have that ionic field projector on all of these fits. And there's always a trade-off here of, do you want to fit more tank or do you want to fit more mobility? So, instead of a nano here, I could fit another tank mod. Let's fit another A&P, for example, that buffs up my tank by quite a bit. So there's some trade-offs there in what you want to do. It depends on what gang you're flying with and what you expect to be flying against. So that's kind of the cookie cutter fits for the Malediction and the Stiletto, I would say. And again, there are variations to these. But now we'll go into some of these other ships that don't necessarily fill this tackle role, but still are what I would consider tackle for your gang. So someone in my corp loves flying the Draugr, right? And the Draugr is great. You can fly it with a long point and a web, or a long point scram in this tackle type of a role. So you're filling a lot of what the Malediction or the Stiletto does. And because you're providing yourself with your own links, you can get very similar scram and web ranges as a Malediction or a Stiletto, which means that you're fulfilling very similar role. The kind of trade-off here is, you're having a much higher signature radius, 155 compared to the Malediction, which is at 66, so almost triple. But on the other hand, you're a little bit more tanky, because you have, with this fit, a 400 plate, getting up to 10k HP, as well as that small armor rep. And you're also providing, on top of all of that, links with your gang. So, the Draugr, when it comes down to utility, is a great example of a high utility tackle ship, which I would love to have in my gang. It provides some damage too, which is great. We'll also talk about the Nightmare. This is just kind of my normal solo Nightmare fit, and it doesn't have to be a Nightmare. It can be anything you want for something that can be like very tanky and be able to get in and out. But I love the Nightmare and these type of battleships because you can get in there, hold a whole lot of tackle, and you can't be pushed off. And it's different than being pushed off from the Malediction where you're mitigating damage, where in these type of ships you're kind of just straight face tanking the damage with your own tank. So other ships that are like this are like the Barghest, for example, where you can hold tackle from very far away while still providing, that role of big damage dealer, and things like that. Anyways, guys, this was the whole video. Let me know if you have any other questions. Feel free to throw them in the comments, and I hope you enjoy and stay tuned for episode 3.